driving under the influence. A person who operates a vehicle impliedly consents to submit to the portable breath test or chemical test under this chapter as a condition of operating a vehicle in Indiana. A person must submit to each portable breath test or chemical test offered by a law enforcement officer under this chapter to comply with this chapter. This is more commonly known as the implied consent law. Refusal to submit to a breathalyzer test. A person who refuses to submit to a breathalyzer test conducted by a law enforcement officer will have his or her license immediately confiscated and will face a license suspension of up to 2 years. Failure of a breathalyzer test. If a person submits to the breathalyzer test, that person's driving privileges may be suspended for a period of up to 180 days upon receipt by the BMV of an affidavit from the law enforcement officer submitted to the court containing the results of the failed test. Post-conviction suspensions. The suspensions discussed above are pre-conviction license suspensions. When a person is convicted of operating a motor vehicle while intoxicated or with a BAC of 0.08% or more, the court is required to suspend the driver's license for at least 90 days or up to 2 years. The suspension periods are longer for repeat offenders. Even if a person is a first-time offender and the local courts defer the conviction, the 90-day suspension is mandatory. The chemical test for intoxication may include breath, blood, or urine. If a breathalyzer test is given and shows 0.00, the person may be taken to a medical facility for a blood test for other drugs. A 12-ounce can of beer, a 5-ounce glass of wine, or 1.5 ounces of 80 proof or 40% distilled spirits all contain the same amount of alcohol. The type of alcohol being considered is ethyl alcohol. Isopropyl alcohol is rubbing alcohol. Other sources of alcohol may include cough syrup, mouthwash, aftershave, cologne, hair tonic, hand sanitizer. These also register on the breathalyzer. The legal limit in Indiana is 0.08 blood alcohol concentration, sometimes called blood alcohol content. If you are under 21, the limit is 0.00 BAC. Note, mixing alcohol with drugs, even some prescription drugs, can cause a synergistic effect. This is where the two drugs, alcohol is considered a drug, interact, causing a completely new result. How drugs affect your driving. Cannabis, smoking joints or bongs, or taking any form of cannabis reduces your ability to control a vehicle and drive safely. Driving after using cannabis means you take longer to respond, alters your distance and time perception, lowers your concentration, coordination, alertness, and ability to react, narrows or blurs your field of vision. Speed, ice, crystal meth, base, or ecstasy. If you take any of these stimulants, you may believe you drive better than you really can, take more risks, drive aggressively, be overstimulated and lose concentration, have blurry or limited vision, see things on the road that aren't where you think they are, have scattered thoughts or delusions. Opiates, heroin, methadone, codeine. Using heroin and other opiates such as morphine, codeine, and methadone when you're going to drive makes you very sleepy, slows your reaction times, makes you lose balance, coordination, and concentration, takes your attention away from what's happening on the road, gives you blurry or limited vision, nausea and vomiting, and mood changes. Note, even prescription drugs count towards driving under the influence.
I'm Sergeant Fred Olnicki with the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. Currently I'm assigned to the Training Academy as a training instructor. I've also been a impaired driving instructor for approximately 19 years.
I'm Joe Turner and I'm the impaired driving coordinator for the state of Indiana.
What are some reasons or how do police officers detect an impaired driver?
Well, the detection portion starts with the car stop. For whatever the reason the officer has for making the car stop. Could be a moving violation, could be even an equipment violation. But then once the officer approaches the vehicle and begins to talk with the driver, they begin to suspect, for a number of different reasons, either alcohol or maybe even drug impairment.
You may not know you've got an impaired driver until you get that person pulled over. So initially you may think you just have a common traffic violation, moving violation, equipment violation, and so on. However, if you get to some high levels of impairment, high doses of alcohol, certain types of drugs, and so on, may be a little easier to spot. They may be the people who are passed out behind the wheel of the car, sitting at a green light, driving on the shoulder, very unusual driving patterns. But that's usually going to be at your higher levels of impairment. But a lot of times with your 08s, your 09s, as far as your breath alcohol concentrations, you may not know until that person actually gets pulled over and you continue that investigation.
Under what situations would a field sobriety test be administered?
Well, once the officer approaches the vehicle, there's a number of different things that the officer is looking for. One, of course, is simply the odor of an alcoholic beverage. You can ask for a breath test with something as minor as that, or you look at the behavior of the individual that's driving. Alcohol does the same thing in everyone. It causes their face to be a little flushed, their eyes to water.
There's several cues that an officer can look for, and it's going to, some of the physical cues are going to be fairly consistent from person to person. Slurred speech, an odor of intoxicating beverage coming from that person, bloodshot glassy eyes, and so on. There may be some other cues also that are going to be individual to that or specific to that individual. You may have containers in plain view. You may have admissions. You may have a lot of other things, stamps on the back of the hand where they've been visiting the clubs. Things like that. They're going to be specific to an individual stop.
What is a standard field sobriety test? What's that consist of?
Well, there's 3 tests that have been validated, that have a lot of experience with determining whether or not a person's impaired. The 3 tests we use that are specific for alcohol is horizontal gaze nystagmus. That's the inability to track a stimulus back and forth across a horizontal plane. Then the 9-step walk and turn test, where you have someone stand on a line, walk a line in a specific manner, turn and come back. And then the 1-leg stand, where they stand on whichever foot they choose and hold the other foot in the air for approximately 30 seconds. There are a number of specific clues that the officer is looking for while the individual is performing these tests. And when they see the clues, there's a very good likelihood that that person's impaired.
Can you describe a little bit about what gaze nystagmus is?
And like I said, it's the inability to track a stimulus back and forth across a horizontal plane. What happens, kind of an easy way to think of it is, as the brain becomes impaired, the tracking function of the eye in a normal, unimpaired person sees something start to move, tells the brain it's moving, and the brain says, follow it. And so it does that several thousand times. It does it very rapidly, so that as the eye tracks back and forth, it looks like the eye is moving smoothly back and forth across. Alcohol is a central nervous system depressant, and it slows this function. And so as the brain becomes impaired, it's kind of like the eye's going, dude, it's moving, and the brain's going, follow it. And so what you get are disruptions in the tracking function. So what you see is the eye jerking as it's trying to follow the stimulus instead of following it smoothly. It's very easy to see, and it happens with everyone. You can't train for it. Tolerance doesn't help it. You can't feel that it's happening, and it's very easy for the officer to identify.
Are there any possible ways to beat a breathalyzer or a breath test?
Not if it's administered correctly. There's procedures that the officers must follow on this. One of them being checking into the mouth before giving a breath test to make sure there is no foreign objects in there. Now, the reason why this came about is there are certain substances that can be in the mouth that can absorb alcohol and give off a false reading, being a residual mouth alcohol. If there's chewing tobacco as an example, tobacco could absorb alcohol. If that tobacco is still in the mouth, it could absorb alcohol and give a reading even though it may not be in the person's system, it's still on their breath. A blood test would not detect that, but a breath test might. That's why we check their mouth to make sure there's nothing in there that we can see, being reasonable. before we give the test. Now, certain objects out there in recent case law in Indiana, it's been decided, are not considered a foreign object. Here's the example. We had one of our DUI cars gave a breath test to a young lady who had a tongue stud. And the attorney argued that, well, that's a foreign object. And under the old way of looking at law, he would have been correct. But what happened is it went to the Indiana Court of Appeals. And what happened on that is they determined that, number one, that stud was in there before she began drinking. And number two, it's made of a substance, a hard metal substance, that will not absorb alcohol. Therefore, Indiana law is now that tongue studs are not considered a foreign object. The same may be considered the old wives' tale of a penny as an example under the tongue. You know, an officer will check that mouth anyway to make sure a penny's not there, but the bottom line comes down to it wouldn't make any difference because that penny's not going to absorb any alcohol. So it would not have any kind of an effect. It does not absorb, so it doesn't take away, it doesn't add to that breath test.
Well, you hear that a lot, and you see some people actually try it. As a matter of fact, one of our officers from Fort Wayne had stopped someone that had $2.20 in change under in his mouth. He'd heard that a penny would do it, and he knew he was real drunk, so he just reached into the change thing and threw it all in there. No, it doesn't work. As a matter of fact, the officers are trained to check in the mouth to make sure that there's nothing in there. It's supposed to be free of foreign objects. The breath test actually will invalidate the test itself. The machine that we use will invalidate the test itself if there's any interference, if there's some type of interferent in there. The officer is supposed to look in the mouth, make sure there's no chewing tobacco or pennies or whatever else someone may have put a foreign substance in there. And then there's a wait period from that time that they look in the mouth for 20 minutes before providing the breath test to allow for any absorption of the alcohol or for the dissipation of any residual mouth alcohol that may have been present when they were first stopped. And then they give them the breath test. But no, there's no real way, there's no truth to it. I believe it was on Mythbusters they actually debunked that myth so that everybody could see it on TV, but there's no way to beat a breath test.
The purpose of the investigation at this point is to find out if this person's impaired or if they're not impaired. If they're not impaired, then pretty much the investigation's over with. If they are impaired, what the officer needs to ask himself next is, why is this person impaired? If it's not alcohol related, they blow a 00 in a breath test, then is it drug related or is it something medically wrong with the person?
As a matter of fact, our definition for drug is any substance, doesn't matter what it is, any substance when taken into the body impairs the person's ability to operate a vehicle safely. If it's causing impairment, it's a drug.
Now, does this include over-the-counter drugs?
It includes over-the-counter medications. It includes prescribed medications. It can include, I know this sounds silly, but it can include hairspray and body spray and gasoline, different things that unfortunately kids will inhale to alter their reality. If it impairs their ability to drive, it doesn't matter what it is. If they can't operate safely when they have that in their body, then it's a drug.
Now, if we go back to the alcohol question real quick, a lot of people think that the basic alcohol is beer, wine, whiskey. Are there any other substances that contain alcohol that people would consume?
I'm not sure I want to give an answer to that. I don't want to have them try it.
What to do if you're involved in a crash? Drivers, passengers, and pedestrians could be injured in an accident at any time or place or along a roadway. Knowing what to do after an accident can make the experience a less frightening one and decrease the chances of unnecessary complications. Indiana law regarding the duties of drivers of motor vehicles involved in an accident. The operator of a motor vehicle involved in an accident shall do the following. Except as provided in Section 1.2, the operator shall immediately stop the operator's motor vehicle at the scene of the accident or as close to the accident as possible in a manner that does not obstruct traffic more than is necessary. Remain at the scene of the accident until the operator does the following. A. Gives the motor vehicle operator's name and address and the registration number to any person involved in the accident. B. Exhibit the operator's driver's license to any person involved in the accident or occupant or any person attending to any vehicle involved in the accident. If the accident results in the injury or death of another person, the operator shall, in addition to the requirements of subdivisions 1 and 2, provide reasonable assistance to each person injured in or trapped by the accident, as directed by a law enforcement officer, medical personnel, or a 911 telephone operator. And, as soon as possible after the accident, immediately give notice of the accident or ensure that another person gives notice of the accident by the quickest means of communication to one of the following: the local police department, if the accident occurs within a municipality, the office of the county sheriff, or the nearest state police post if the accident occurs outside a municipality, a 911 telephone operator. If the accident involves a collision with an unattended vehicle or damage to property other than a vehicle, the operator shall, in addition to the requirements of subdivisions 1 and 2, take reasonable steps to locate and notify the owner or person in charge of the damaged vehicle or property of the damage. And if after reasonable inquiry the operator cannot find the owner or person in charge of the damaged vehicle or property, the operator must contact a law enforcement officer or agency and provide the information required by this section. If, after an operator of a motor vehicle is involved in an accident, the operator's motor vehicle comes to a stop in the traveled portion of a highway, the operator shall, as soon as safely possible. If, after an operator of a motor vehicle is involved in an accident, the operator's motor vehicle comes to a stop in the traveled portion of a highway, the operator shall, as soon as safely possible, move the motor vehicle off the traveled portion of the highway and to a location as close to the accident as possible. However, the operator shall not move the motor vehicle if the accident involves the transportation of hazardous materials or results in the injury or death of a person or the entrapment of a person in a vehicle. An operator of a motor vehicle who knowingly or intentionally fails to comply with the above requirements commits the offense of leaving the scene of an accident. This offense carries various misdemeanor and felony penalty levels based on the circumstances of the accident. After an accident and upon request from the BMV, you will be required to provide proof of financial responsibility to the BMV. Your insurance provider may electronically file proof of financial responsibility in the form of a certificate of compliance. The certificate of compliance will demonstrate that you held an effective motor vehicle insurance policy that meets the state's minimum liability protection during the accident.
My name is Donald Harris. I'm a sergeant with the Greenwood Police Department afternoon shift. I'm a road supervisor. I'm also an accident reconstructionist, have been since 1986.
Sergeant Harris, what's the difference between accident investigation and accident reconstruction?
Accident investigation, an officer takes the report. He just goes and takes the report. Reconstructionist reconstructs the accident to the point where what happened. The reconstructionist tells what happens.
When a driver's involved in an accident, what's the driver's basic responsibilities?
The basic responsibility of an accident, or the person involved in an accident, is his to make sure that he is safe and the other drivers of the other vehicle are safe too. When somebody calls in for an accident, the dispatcher will ask them, is there anybody injured? Yes or no. And if there's injured, then we'll start the medics and the fire department and everything. And but their responsibility is to make sure that everything is that they're all right.
As far as the driver, if if the other driver is injured, what are their responsibilities?
The driver of the vehicle that is not injured should administer first aid to the first driver that is injured if possible. The Good Samaritan law states that they cannot be held responsible for anything that happens if something does happen to the other person that is injured.
Really admit guilt at the accident scene?
Do they?
Or should they let the accident investigator do that?
Well, the accident investigator will usually determine the fault, but a lot of times they will state, well, I run the red light, or I made the turn in front of him.
So, when the police officer arrives, what documentation will they ask of the drivers?
The first thing the officer does when he gets on the scene is make sure that no one is injured. And if they are injured, then they contact dispatch, and dispatch administers, or not administers, but contacts rescue and everything like that. Then the officer will ask for the driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance.
What if a driver does not have the license in possession or no insurance?
Okay, we have computers in our vehicle that we can run. I'll get his name, his date of birth, and his social security number, and I can run him or her in my computer, and that will tell me if they have a driver's license or not. And if they don't have insurance, most of them have insurance written on their registration to say such and such insurance company, and it'll and I'll put that down on there, and I'll ask them, I said, is this insurance current? And if they say yes, there isn't anything I can do about it.
If they don't have their license in their possession, what happens?
Well, like I say, I'll just run them on the computer, and if they come back suspended or anything like that, then I'll take appropriate enforcement action at that point. But if they don't have their driver's license, like they leave them at home, I'm just going down to the store to get a pack of cigarettes or get a candy bar or something like that. I'll run them, and if they are up to date, I won't do anything.
And if they don't have a license?
If they don't have a license, if they're suspended, infraction, which is the first time suspension, I'll just write them a ticket for driving while suspended. If they are suspended prior, which is a second offense of suspension, then I'll arrest them and take them to jail.
If the vehicles are undrivable and they have to be towed, we get a lot of times people want to know where do they go to get their car, how do they get their car back? Okay.
We have a contract with the Wrecker Service in Greenwood that we call anytime we need an accident towed. They take it to their lot. We give the driver of the wrecker will give them a card with their name, telephone number, and everything on it, and they can pick it up anytime. If it isn't drivable, I suggest to them that it goes down to the lot. Then their insurance company can go to the lot and check the vehicle at the lot instead of moving 2 or 3 places.
And after the collision and motions have calmed down a little bit, how can someone obtain a copy of the accident report?
The accident report, we have in our computers now, we have the accident report, the United States accident crash report on our computers. We do the report on our computers, download it on a thumb drive, take it to station and download it at the station, and then our records clerk reads it over and makes sure everything is proper on it, and then they send it to the state. They can come to the Greenwood Police Station and get an accident report, or any police station where the accident may occur.
And just for the record, is there any types of major contributions that you see that causes collisions?
Driver error, driver inattention. Most of it is they aren't paying attention to their surroundings. They'll get a lot of time they'll be talking on the telephone or something like that, and they've got tunnel vision, and they don't see anything on either side of them, and then it's, you know, the next thing you know, somebody comes out and wham, you got a crash.
And when you get called to the scene, is there anything that the people ask of you, any common questions or anything that you try to tell the drivers?
I've had drivers ask me, I've never been involved in an accident before, what do I do? And then I explain to them, you know, this is what you have to do, A, B, C, and right on down to get their vehicle back. Contact your insurance company. I'll give them the SR. We give them an information exchange form. The officer fills it out, and if we've got 2 vehicles, we got 2 forms that we give to each driver. And if we have more multi-car, we got 4 form that we can give to 4 or 5, whatever many people we have. But we tell them, take this to your insurance company, and they have to sign on this SR21 form to show that they had insurance at the time of the crash. Failure to do so will get their driver's license suspended in the state of Indiana, also in any other state that they drive in that has a contract with Indiana.
And do you find any type of common driver distractions that they admit to?
Yeah, I just wasn't paying attention. I mean, that's mainly the thing. I wasn't paying attention.
I'm Sam Alexander, Lieutenant with Speedway Police Department. I'm in charge of traffic, motorcycles, and also our day shift uniform division. The best thing the driver can do, obviously, first thing is slow down, signal with their right turn signal on, pull to the right, and try to stop someplace that's safe for them and as well as the officer if possible, but also to stop as soon as possible. When the driver pulls over, once they come to a complete stop, the first thing that I would advise the driver to do is remain calm. Okay, I know for especially young drivers, but even older drivers, and I've dealt with both. Best thing to do is just remain calm. Don't make it any worse than what it is. The worst case scenario out of this, more than likely, is going to be probably a traffic ticket. So, I know especially kids worry about going home and telling their parents that they got a traffic ticket today for speeding or running a red light or something like that. But again, like I said, remain calm. Whatever's going to happen with a ticket or a warning, it's going to happen. But if you remain calm, the situation, you can help the situation a whole lot more. Never. The thing is that you got to put yourself in the officer's position, because when we pull up on a traffic stop, we don't know who we're actually stopping. And the best thing the person can do, like I said, is just sit in the vehicle. Don't be moving around. Don't reach for things, or try. I know they mean well and they're trying to be helpful by finding the registration before the officer gets up there, or digging in their rear pocket for their license. But again, if from the officer's perspective, if he's approaching that car and he sees somebody reaching down here, reaching down there, and all you can see is the back of their head, but you can tell they're actually reaching into something, whether it's the glove box, we don't know what they're reaching for. And, it's a lot better if the driver just sits there and relaxes. If they want to put their hands, fold them in their lap, if they want to hold on the steering wheel, just relax. And the other thing that I would say is, don't undo your seatbelt. Just pull over, stop, and wait for the officer to come up. And the reason I say that, if I approach a car and I walk up to the driver and the first thing I see is they don't have a seatbelt on, then my first question is why aren't you wearing a seatbelt? And a lot of times, because I've seen them up moving around, and I try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, if I see them moving around, the first answer I get, well, I was getting my registration because I knew you was going to want it, so I took my seatbelt off. And again, like I said, they're moving around the vehicle. I don't know what they're doing. So in order for it to make it safe for the officer, keep everybody at calm, it's just better just to sit there and relax. Let the officer come up. He'll tell you why he's stopping you, what the charge is. He'll tell you what paperwork he needs to see from you in order to identify you and make sure that the plates are properly registered to the vehicle, those type of things, and the fact that you do have insurance on your vehicle. You're required to show your driver's license, your vehicle registration, and also proof of insurance. There's so many variables there. If I'm a county officer and we're out in the county, you know, it's really hard to find a secure or a safe place, I guess, to pull over where you're kind of off the road, and also to find kind of a well-lit place. But if you're in inner city, you know, the best thing if there's traffic, or I'm sorry, if there's street lights, you know, a filling station, something like that, a restaurant. If you want to pull in that parking lot, you're getting out of the traffic flow, plus you're in a well-lit area. And again, I think that makes the driver feel more calm. So if they want to turn the dome light on, that's certainly fine to do that. I think that the main thing is that you don't feel any more panicked because I'm not sure that's a police officer behind me. Well, if you're at least in an area where, like I said, a restaurant, a gas station, or where there's people at, that's going to make you feel a little bit more calmer. So the main thing that I would suggest you do, say it's a block or two up the road, slow down and put your flashers on, acknowledge the officer that, hey, I see you behind me, I'm not running from you. And then once you get up that block or two, whatever it is, because you see that gas station or you see the restaurant where it's well lit, once you pull in there, once the officer comes up to your car, if he asks you, why didn't you stop back there? Sir, in all due respect, I was just trying to find a well-lit place just in case you wasn't really a police officer. And you know what? I don't think there's a police officer in the world that would have a problem with that. And you've actually made it safer for the police officer also because, again, there's more lights in the area. Just like myself, I drive a completely unmarked vehicle. It's a black Charger. It does light up very well like a Christmas tree when I do turn the lights on, but there's no markings on there. And you know, whether you're male, female, you could certainly have that concern either way. But again, that's what I'm saying. If you feel, a couple of things you can do. If you feel uncomfortable, you're not really sure it's a police officer, it's somebody maybe you think that's imitating a police officer, you can do a couple of things. One, find that place, like I said, that's well lit. Again, if you're slowing your speed down, you're obviously not running from the police officer. If you put your flashers on, you've signaled to him that I'm acknowledging you, I'm slowing down, I'm not running, which is two important things. Then the second thing you can do besides that, obviously, I think everybody has a cell phone. If you're in question, and if you're really truly concerned, jump on the phone, call 911 and say, hey, I'm being pulled over at this location. The police car, it doesn't have any markings on it. It does have red and blue lights on it, but I still don't feel comfortable that it is actually a police officer. And especially if you don't have the opportunity to have that filling station or that restaurant or some well-lit place where people are around, you know, you may want to just slow down and like I said, you're on the phone to 911, have them contact the nearest police department, which is what they're going to do anyway. And they're going to know, they're going to come over the radio, ask any officer out there, are you making a traffic stop on what type of vehicle and what color in this area? And then if the officer verifies it, the dispatcher can confirm it, and the driver knows for sure, okay, I'm good, it's a police officer. By law, again, with me having an unmarked car, I am required to be in full uniform just as I am now in order to make a traffic stop. If I'm not in uniform, or if I'm dressed, you know, jeans and a golf type shirt or something like that, I cannot make a traffic stop as far as something that's an infraction. Now, the law did just change recently where if somebody is intoxicated, that you can't actually make that traffic stop. Obviously, you're preventing a serious accident and you're protecting a life, but at the same time, you're calling for a marked police car and a uniformed officer, you know, to come up and assist you, and then they obviously would take the investigation over from there. Absolutely. If you have a marked police car, the law says if you have a marked police car that anyone would look at that vehicle and say, that's absolutely a police car, then that officer is not required to be in uniform as I am. He can either be in uniform or he can be in a pair of jeans and a golf shirt. But the other thing that I would advise every driver, that if you have an officer just like me, if I come up and I'm in uniform like this, you as a citizen have a right to say, officer, may I see your ID, please? And by law, we have to show our ID. And on our ID, it will show our name, it will have our picture on there, it will have what department I'm with, and also my rank on there. So, if you have some type of concern that, this guy, he's got a uniform on, but I'm just not really sure, he's in an unmarked police car, I'm not sure that it is a police car, ask for that ID. And explain to the officer, say, I'm a little concerned here, may I see your ID since you're in an unmarked car? I'd like to see that just to confirm. It all depends. If an officer pulls a vehicle over and they smell maybe alcohol in the vehicle, they smell, say, some type of narcotics, marijuana, something like that, you can get a consent to search, which you're asking the driver who has control over the vehicle to give permission. Or if you have enough probable cause and they don't want to allow you to do that, then you can actually apply for a search warrant and a judge will sign it, and then you can get into the vehicle if it comes down to that. There's not a law really that requires that you have to, but I think it's a professional thing, and the last thing that you want anybody to, especially a police officer, you don't want that officer to say, or to observe you reaching for something and forgot, oh my gosh, my gun's over here, and all of a sudden there's the guns displayed. You didn't tell the officer it was there. Then you kind of put the officer on guard, and you put yourself kind of at a bad situation. Not that you've necessarily done anything wrong, but to me it makes more sense to let the officer know, hey officer, I do have a gun in my glove box, or I have one on my hip, and I do have a permit, and I'm happy to show you. That way, like I said, you don't have anything to hide. Are you mandated to do that? Not here in Indiana, no. But does it make more sense to do that? In my opinion, yes, it does. I think the most important thing is, once in a while, especially people that's been driving for a while, and as well as the new students, really know the manual as far as the laws. And by what laws I'm really concerned about, and actually gets a little aggravating on. When a police officer, an ambulance, or a fire truck, when they have their lights and siren on, they're going someplace because somebody needs us. It's very, very important that we get there quickly but safely as possible, because somebody needs our help. That's why we're going. It's important to know what to do when a police officer or a fireman or an ambulance comes up behind you with their lights and siren on. By law, you're required to pull to the right and stop. So many people, they miss that, I guess, in the book somewhere. But I've had people, and I'm in the left lane. So I've had people I'm responding to help someone, my lights and siren on. I've had people stop right in front of me, pull to the left, pull to the right, and then actually come back. They don't know what to do. And I think that's the most important message that we can get out to the people, and that they should know, is that by law, if a emergency vehicle is behind you with their lights and siren on, pull to the right as quickly as possible, as safely as possible, and stop. You may be thinking, okay, all I need to do is move over to the right. But what you don't realize is maybe a half a block ahead of you, or a block of whatever the distance is, that officer may have to turn right, or that emergency vehicle may have to turn right. If you didn't stop, now I've just barely passed you, and now I have to stop because you didn't. So it's important to know, pull to the right. Number one, stop. Get out of the way and just remain there for just a sec. That emergency vehicle will be past you and you can go on your way. I've had people, like I said, stop right in front of me, pull to the left, pull to the right. And by law, emergency vehicle is supposed to pass you on the left side. You are supposed to pull to the right. Well, if you stopped on the left lane and then I have moved to the right, and then you decide, oh, by law I'm supposed to pull to the right, and then you cut back in front of me, we just had an accident, which has prevented me to get somebody that needs my help, and it just caused another problem. And you know, at the worst case scenario, one of us got injured, and it just didn't have to be if we just would have known pull to the right and stop. I think that's very important.
Knowing the rules of the road, having a positive attitude, and following the tips of this program, you should have all the facts for being a safe and defensive driver.